Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. You're here for the SB1 Accountability and Transparency Guideline Update Workshop. We will get started in just a few minutes. We're going to give everyone some time to get logged on. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're just giving it a few minutes to let attendees log on. So you're here for the SB1 Accountability and Transparency Guideline Update Workshop. So we'll get started in just a few minutes. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for attending the workshop for the SB1 Accountability and Transparency Guidelines. We just waited a couple of minutes to give everyone a chance to log on, and it looks like we have pretty much quite a few of you have already logged on. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And I'm Dawn Chesser, and I've been working on the updating the accountability guidelines for the past few months. And today is our third workshop for the update. And before we get started onto our agenda, I'm going to turn it over to Kayla to review the webinar logistics. Kayla?
Thank you, Dawn. Good afternoon, everyone. The workshop agenda and PowerPoint are located under the Handouts tab and can be downloaded and saved during the webinar. You can find the audio, question, and handout tabs on the right-hand side of your screen on the webinar panel. Under the audio tab, you have the choice to listen in via the computer or telephone option. If you prefer computer audio, please select the appropriate box. If you prefer the phone call option, select the corresponding box and dial the phone number, access code, and audio PIN as directed by the automated system. Please note that if the audio PIN is not entered, you will remain in listen-only mode and will be unable to speak should you have a comment. As a reminder, each registered attendee is provided a unique link and phone number to access the webinar. These cannot be shared with other participants as they are registered to a specific attendee. We welcome comments and questions from attendees as a part of each topic at this workshop. There will also be an opportunity for comments and questions at the end of the presentation. There are two options for participants to provide comments. You may click on the hand icon to indicate you wish to make a comment. You will then be unmuted and called upon to make your comment. Please be sure to state your name and affiliation prior to voicing your remarks. Also, please use the raise hand feature as early on into the topic as you can to give the system time to acknowledge you. If you raise your hand to speak, please do not lower your hand until you are done making your comment. This helps us ensure that you can be unmuted properly. You may also use the questions tab to submit a question or comment. Please type in the topic you are commenting on and your comment. Commission staff will read the comment on your behalf. You will not be able to be on camera while making comments. Thank you for joining us today. Back to you, Dawn.
All right, thanks, Kayla. So let's go ahead and get started with just a quick agenda review. So we're going to just give a schedule update. We're going to be talking about expanding the applicability of the accountability and transparency guidelines to other programs. We're going to continue a discussion about the forecast year reporting, which we had started at our last workshop. And then we're going to be talking about the discussion draft guidelines. And then, of course, our closing and next steps. We can recap and ask questions and comments. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. So our schedule. When we sent the save the date out, we did indicate that we moved out the schedule. And the moving out the schedule is allowing us to get some more perspective and input on the forecast reporting, which we're doing that today. So today's our third workshop. We're going to be still having the commissioner briefing, most likely early January. And then the draft guidelines will be presented at the January meeting towards the end of January. If we need to have a fourth workshop, then we would be having that early February. And then our final guidelines will be presenting for adoption at the March 2023 commission meeting. Pretty simple, straightforward. So we can go ahead and go on to the next one. So expanding the applicability. So this topic has come up from commission staff, and commission staff is all in agreement that being accountable and transparent is actually applicable to all of our programs and just not our SB1 programs. Although SB1 does have higher expectations, we do want to try and combine some of our existing or new programs into the reporting requirements and maybe some of the other sections. So we are want to be able to have this conversation and see what you guys think about this. When we do have this presented, and when we get to the discussion draft guidelines, there is some language in there. We would be doing this, we would extend the applicability definitely through the public stakeholder process. So if we have a new program that's being developed, the topic would be discussed there. If we have existing guidelines or policies are being updated, we would be having the conversations during those meetings and workshops. So we think this provides more consistency across all the programs, which can be, less chances of error or misunderstanding. Expectations are the same. So right now, I understand that the new program, the Local Transportation Climate Adaptation Program, has already kind of discussed adding in the reporting requirements from the accountability and transparency guidelines to that program. And so just curious what you guys think, have any questions, concerns, or comments regarding expanding the applicability. And so while you're thinking about that, I have already added some generic language to the guidelines, and then some more specific information about the Local Transportation Climate Adaptation Program. And I do have Rebecca Light, who's the program manager for the Climate Adaptation Program, on the webinar. So if you do have questions specific to that program, then she's here to address those. So I'll just give you a couple of seconds here to think about this and see if you have any questions or comments.
Hey, Dawn, this is Celeste. We do have a raised hand if you'd like to take that now.
Sure.
Okay, Denise Arriaga, you are unmuted. Denise, you're unmuted. Okay, you're not coming through. Maybe if you can send a question in the yeah, I hear you. Hello?
Okay, so is my audio coming through?
Yes. Denise, maybe try submitting your question in the question. We could hear you, but it's a little spotty.
Hi, Dawn. We don't have any more hands raised. We do have a question in the question tab. It looks like Denise was able to submit hers.
Okay.
So Denise asked, in the guidelines, front-end accountability is defined for each program. What will it look like for the new program?
So Rebecca, do you want to address that, or would you like me to?
Go ahead, Dawn.
Okay, so what my understanding is from speaking with Rebecca is that the Local Transportation Climate Adaptation Program would adhere to all of the reporting requirements. So that would be the progress reporting, the completion report, final delivery report, and then whatever the new forecast reporting section is going to look like. In addition, the consequences section of the accountability guidelines would be also applicable. The standard review of allocations and program reporting is also applicable to it. So we're not at this time proposing to have the climate adaptation program adhere to the baseline agreement requirements.
Thanks, Dawn. We received, Denise said thank you for answering her question. Okay. We also received one more comment from Priscilla Martinez Velez. They said, I support applicability to all programs because keeping track of different requirements for every state and federal fund source is already complicated enough.
Yes, thank you, Priscilla. We agree. We definitely agree with that.
Dawn, I'm not seeing any more raised hands or questions or comments come through for this topic.
Okay, so let's, again, I always can go back to slides at the end of the presentation to answer questions. So let's go ahead and move on. So the forecast reporting. So we discussed this new reporting requirement at our October workshop, and it was basically about when and how to report at some point in time after construction is complete. I want to thank those who provided feedback during the workshop and to those that sent follow-up comments. So we appreciate that input, and we tried to take some of that into consideration. So just kind of wanted to reiterate that this requirement is being proposed based on comments and direction from our commissioners. So we have, I'm proposing a new name for this. Instead of calling it forecast reporting, we want to call it a project performance analysis, because we see this as more of an analysis as to how the project is performing. And the purpose and the goal of this is to report on the delivery of the outcomes and the performance metrics over time. The information in this analysis may be used to inform future iterations of program guidelines. This analysis would be due within 6 months of the date that construction has been completed for 5 years. So we're trying to keep it to a 5-year mark at this point, and then trying to keep it on how we're meeting those metrics and outcomes. Let's see. So I'm going to go ahead and go on to the next slide, and then we can take questions and comments. So the next slide is the analysis should include a discussion on whether the project is on track to deliver the forecasted metrics or outcomes. And there should be a separate narrative for each of those metrics and outcomes. Future plans on the ability to meet the forecasted year metric or outcome. So an explanation of what else is being done to make sure that that the forecasted year metric or outcome is gonna be met. Progress or achievement of the goals of the applicable program, and then any lessons learned. So I would expect that this would be more of a narrative, and you would describe in detail the why and why nots. For the future plans, kind of what needs to happen to get the benefit, like there needs to be other projects completed, there needs to be more funding, other state or federal mandates. Those are just some examples of things that could still need to happen in order to get that metric or benefit. And then the ability, what needs to happen to sustain or keep that benefit at least to the forecasted year, or maybe even after the forecasted year. Let's see. I'm gonna stop right there with those 2 slides and see if there's any questions or comments really quick before I go on.
Hi, Dawn. I'm not seeing any raised hands right now, and we don't have any written questions or comments at the moment.
Okay, so let me keep going and then we can pause again. So for the project performance analysis, a qualitative analysis versus a quantitative results. So we definitely are going to require a qualitative analysis. When would a quantitative result be appropriate? We could use the most current model that the modeling folks have with each agency, and we could do that with or without the project to compare the results. If the project used the CalBC version, those old versions are still available, so you would be able to rerun that version. I threw in the Caltrans demand model here just to get some thoughts or feedback about this. I'm not sure how it would be applicable or if we could use it, because I don't know much about it, but I know it's out there. This possibly could be used somehow with just the state highway projects, but I'm thinking this needs some more thought. And of course, depending on the project type and size would depend on what kind of analysis would be required. So for example, ATP projects, I believe their metrics is basically the ATP counts. So that could be very easily done by doing recounts after the project is done after 5 years. But it would be very, very different for like a full model run for the trade corridors or congested corridor projects. And then kind of the same with the road rehab, you know, running some type of model run for a road rehab project would not be the most benefit use of time or money. Let's see. So I do know that the models, rerunning a model run in 5 years, my understanding based on from some conversations over the past couple of months has been the underlying data or the base assumptions in those models are updated every 5 years by a federal mandate. So we understand that there would be changes in methodologies or data because of that, but I'm thinking that at the very least, whatever your current model is could be run with or without the project to determine if there's a difference, and then maybe explain those differences in this analysis. So these are just some of the thoughts that I had on what we could be doing at the 5-year mark after construction is completed. And this is kind of based on what I heard from the past workshop, and then of course the follow-up comments that I got afterwards. And then the last slide for this particular section is consequences for non-compliance. If you want to move this slide forward, Kayla. So again, we want to acknowledge that there will be variances and factors beyond the control of the local agencies when it comes to the forecast data and rerunning models. So I want to make sure that you guys understand that there's not going to be any consequences for not meeting the metrics, but yet we still want to know how is the project going to meet them, or if they did meet them, or so that we know how we might improve the programs in later cycles. Okay, so with that, I know that's a lot of information in a short amount of time, but I'd love to hear you guys' feedback, suggestions, comments on any of those 4 slides.
Hi, Dawn. So we actually have Angel Pyle on the line, and she has some comments on this topic. So I'm going to turn it over to Angel.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it. Hey, Dawn, mic check. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Brilliant. Awesome. Thank you. So I'd like to maybe have some more discussion on using CalBC, or maybe look at some other options to maybe zero in on what the benefits might be. Like, for example, I know that traffic ops within the department has a lot of different information, and including other various areas as well, but there's key inputs that go into CalBC in terms of, like, maybe if it's a freight or TSET project, freight volumes, or if it's a congested corridor project, ADT or AADT and such. And I'd like to maybe look at that as perhaps another option for like reporting performance, depending on what year that information is collected. And I'm not thoroughly familiar with all of like the truck volume collection and so on and so forth, but I'd like to put that out there. I don't know if a model would be necessarily the best way to validate the performance, but certainly open to having more conversations about it. But just wanted to put out, like, maybe using some of the actual data inputs that would go into CalBC and refresh those after a certain period of time, whether it's 5 years, 8 years, 10 years, whatever, or if it's more immediately available within a year of construction or construction completion, as an alternative option for looking at or validating or just reporting performance. So sorry, I know I was rambling there.
No, thanks, Angel. So let me make sure, see if I can understand. So each of the projects have chose to either do a CalBC or run their own their own demand models with the local agencies. So are you suggesting that every project then goes back to a CalBC and runs that at some point after construction?
No, in fact, I'm suggesting the opposite potentially, like not using a CalBC run, but perhaps like doing a like let's just take a TSET project as an example. Truck volumes would be an input into CalBC, and then along with the other project attributes and then utilizing the model there to project some sort of outcome. What I'm suggesting in terms of a validation of performance would be to take data, whatever increments that's collected in, like, I don't know if they do it every 1 or 2 years, I'd have to check with the team, but refreshing whatever that metric is that would have gone into CalBC. So like reassessing, okay, what are the truck volumes now after like post-project completion to see what that performance is. Does that make more sense?
I think so. But who would be entering data and into what, I guess?
Sure, they wouldn't be entering data into any model, but like let's say that an anticipated benefit is truck volumes increase of X number, which would be a certain percentage or something like that over the baseline volumes. What I'm suggesting then is, yes, within 6 months or maybe even 12, or depending on what the data collection increments are, would be going back and then saying, okay, what are the truck volumes in the area now post project completion, and reporting that data as opposed to putting it in a model.
Okay, I see what you're saying, and that would only be for projects that are on the state highway system.
Potentially, I'm sure that there's other data available that would be a more accurate representation for off-system projects. Certainly happy to talk further about that, but this would certainly be an avenue for on-system projects or projects with on-system components.
Okay, all right. Okay, good. Good comments. Thank you. Is there anyone else that wants to?
Yes, Dawn, there's actually a two-part question from Daniel Burke. He would like to know, how would the commission use the data submitted for the forecast, and what are the consequences for not submitting a forecast for the project performance analysis?
So as on one of the previous slides, we'd be using this information to inform the development of future cycles or future versions of our program guidelines. And consequences at this time, and I believe we have that on the slide. There's no consequences for meeting the performance metrics. The consequences for not submitting the analysis report, that would be already identified in the accountability guidelines in the non-consequences section, which, to remind everyone, it ranges from a formal letter from the commission. The agency would appear before the commission to explain why they're not reporting this information or providing this analysis. It could be, in the most egregious situations, it could be not recommending allocation of funding on other projects for that local agency. It could be reduced reimbursements when an agency is invoicing. So we already have those consequences outlined in the accountability guidelines. And so those would be applicable to projects that do not submit this new performance analysis. So I hope that answers your questions, Daniel.
Thanks, Dawn. I'm not seeing any more raised hands or written questions. Oh, we do actually have one more written question that came in. I'm going to turn it back over to Leanne to handle these.
Yeah, it looks like the first question is going to be from Lewis. Is this a one-time report at the 5-year mark?
At this time, that's what we're proposing. That's what we're proposing at this point. So we may get some more direction from our commissioners at the January meeting, indicating that they would like us to come up with some type of reporting more closer to like maybe a 10-year or 20-year mark based on the actual forecasted data that has been submitted with the applications. But we'll know more after our January commission meeting.
Perfect. And then there's one more from Jennifer Tendrick. It says, thank you for thinking more about the project performance analysis. The approach presented is reasonable. I like the 5-year timeline and like the idea of varying requirements based on project type and size. My one suggestion is around requiring one narrative per metric/outcome. Many metrics are interrelated to each other, so it could be helpful to allow one narrative so long as it hits all the outcomes. It can sometimes tell a better story or more complete story when you are intentional about relating outcomes or metrics.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer.
Hey, Don, we do have a raised hand. Louis Zhao, you are unmuted. There you go.
Hi, this is yeah, sorry, it remuted me and unmuted me. This is Louis Zhao, OCT. I was want to ask a question about the 5-year mark. I think the one thing I would request is try making this as simple as possible. Consolidating the narrative would be great, but I don't know how many agencies spent more time working on performance metrics this SB1 cycle than actually writing the grant application. But it was definitely the case for me where we spent an extensive amount of time putting these metrics together. More so than we actually wrote in the text for the grant application. So if there's any way we could simplify this, it'd be better. The 5-year mark makes sense to me. I just don't want to see this grow to like an annual reporting requirement, just given how much time it takes to pull this data together and the possibility even not being able to get this data when we request it. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Louis. So our intent is to try and make it as simple as possible. But what I don't want to have happen is it becomes so simple that it becomes like a yes and no kind of answer to the questions. We really want to really have some qualitative information summaries in order to, looking at a bigger picture, in order to understand whether a program as a whole is meeting the goals, making an impact. So we're trying to make it as simple as possible. The first reiteration of this at the 5-year mark for projects, you know, we're gonna learn as we do these, and then of course as we learn and determine that changes need to be made, then we'll make those changes in future iterations or updates to the accountability guidelines. So very similar to cycle 1 of our SB1 programs compared to cycle 3. We started out with benefits, and then, you know, cycle 2, we got a little bit better in asking what we needed. And then with cycle 3, we actually went into this, created the whole performance metric handbook. So I anticipate probably with this 5-year performance analysis reports, we're going to go through a couple of different iterations before we get to something usable. But we will try and make it as simple as possible for you guys. Okay, Dewey's.
It looks like we have one more comment from Adrian Cordoso. Please consider that future methodologies may change, so future reports need to allow for changes in how data is collected and tracked.
Yep. Thanks, Adrian. Good point.
Hey, Don, there's another raised hand. Louis Zhao.
Thanks. Sorry, it's me again. I just wanted to just follow up really quickly too. I had another question. It's which cycles this will impact. Will it go back to cycle 1, or are we just talking about this current cycle and on? That's my first question. The second one I want to is more of a comment. we noticed that there were 3 sets of performance metrics. The PPR has a separate set, the guidebook has a separate set, and then the guidelines have a separate set as well. Some of them are linked and some of them aren't. We noticed that the PPR also requested like a different measure. So it'd be like reporting it by 100 million or 1 million miles versus 100 million miles of VMT. And I think what we would want to see is at least at some point, depending on which cycle this hits, a correction done there at some point in time, because there may be confusion on what baseline we're using, if we're using what's in the guidelines or what's in the PPR. Thanks.
Okay, good point. So Matthew, is that something you can respond to, in the differences of the guidebook versus the PPR versus the actual program guidelines?
Yeah, that's very good feedback, Lewis. We obviously we're moving quite a, in quite a more robust direction with the guidebook. So I would say, the guidebook itself, not the ePPR, not the guidelines. The guidebook has like a matrix at the beginning, or like a table that explains which metrics are required by program. Our thought, or our intention, was that the ePPR and the performance metrics table that matches, or that's included with the ePPR, should match the guidebook. So if you notice inconsistencies that maybe you took notes on and you wouldn't mind providing that to us, obviously, we tried to make it consistent across the 2 places. I would say the guidelines themselves should not have done an exhaustive listing of performance metrics. We were relying more on the guidebook itself, which marks which ones are required for which program. And then the ePPR should really just have a table that allows the guidebook performance metrics to translate into the ePPR, which is where they can be dropped in. But we'd be happy to take that feedback to try to make corrections moving forward. But to answer your first question, this is not going, these requirements are not going to go back to cycle 1 or cycle 2. This would be starting with cycle 3 moving forward, which is why we're trying to get this updated accountability and transparency guidelines adopted before we adopt the cycle 3 programs of projects. So hopefully that kind of addresses, and I apologize for inconsistencies, but we'd be happy to take a look at it.
Thanks, Matthew. Appreciate that. Since I wasn't involved in the guidebook and the actual applications and stuff, so I wasn't for sure. Anyways, so it sounds like, just to clarify, that this new project performance analysis will start effective with cycle 3 once they're adopted. And the performance metric guidebook actually takes precedence over what's in the ePPR or the application, I'm sorry, not the application, but the program guidelines.
Thanks, Dawn. We have a couple more written comments. So Angel Pyle just wanted to let us know that Caltrans can support any clarifications on the PPRs. And then we have one more written comment from Andrea Zurich. Please be specific in the guidelines about what is meant by construction completion. For example, complete for beneficial use or contract acceptance.
So yes, we will put something in there, and the same with the language that's used in the final delivery report. It's when the project is open to the public and actually being used. So it's not one contract acceptance, it's actually when it's being used, because once it's being used, then that starts starts counting towards the 5-year mark as to determining benefits.
Thank you, Dawn. I'm not seeing any more hands raised or written comments or questions at the moment.
Okay, Let's see. Okay, let's go ahead and move on then. And so we are on slide 11 for the discussion draft guidelines. So there is in the handouts a PDF version of a discussion draft, which shows the proposed changes in strikeout. And the section about the performance analysis, I left that blank because I wanted to hear, our conversation today. So we can, let's see, the comments due, I'm going to need these. Any comments you have, you can send them via email. That's fine to me. And I'll need those back by close of business on December 27th. So that gives you guys 2 weeks. If I receive them by the 27th, then I can use those for consideration of incorporating them into the draft guidelines going to the January commission meeting. Comments after that may be used for consideration in the final guidelines. But once the guidelines are posted with the January agenda, then additional formal comments can be submitted going towards that would be considered for the final guidelines also. So just as a note, between December 27th and probably around January 13th, the whole set of guidelines will be going under our executive management review and some peer reviews at the commission staff level. So there may be additional changes. I'm not expecting anything major, but again, you never know. So, and then we may hear something from our commissioner briefings that may need to be added in, but I'm not expecting anything major for that. So I encourage all of you to save a copy of the PDF from the webinar. It's not posted to the website. Before we can post it to the website, it needs to go through our remediation process. So that's going to take a couple of days before it gets posted to the website. If you don't happen to grab or save a copy out of today's webinar, you can email me and I can email you back a copy before it gets posted out there on the website. The other thing I was going to try and do is kind of draft up the section for the performance analysis section and have that in the guidelines once it's posted to the website. Okay, so with that, we can go through the actual guidelines if you guys want to right now. I can walk you through the changes. The majority of these changes are the clarifications and the changes that we've talked about in the past workshops. So I don't think you should be surprised by any of them, but if you guys want to go ahead and go through this section by section, I'd be more than happy to walk you through it. So let me know what you would like to do.
Hi, Dawn. We received one comment so far asking us to walk through the guidelines. I'm not seeing any other hands raised or written comments or questions right now.
Okay, all right. Well, then I think we'll go ahead and walk through them, and that'll also give you guys time to kind of think about the performance analysis and we can circle back on that topic after we go through these guidelines. Okay, so Kiva, are you able to bring up the actual guidelines?
Yeah, I can, Dawn. If everyone can just be patient for just a minute with me and I can go ahead and bring those up.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Dawn, hopefully everybody can see this now. I have the version that is in your handouts tab is what I have pulled up right now if you want to follow along with us.
Okay, great. Great. Okay, why don't you go ahead and go to the next page. Okay, first page, no changes. Page 3. Okay, the very top of page 3, this is the kind of the generic language I was talking about for applicability to other programs. So this is new language being added. And again, this would be determined during that program's update of the guidelines or policies, and it would definitely be done through the Commission's public stakeholder process. The middle section of the applicability is just clarification that not all of the SB1 funded projects are subject to baseline agreement and progress reporting, but they are subject to the in-progress accountability and follow-up. For example, the LPP formula is not required to do the quarterly progress reporting with Caltrans, but they are required to do the follow-up accountability, which is the completion reports, the final delivery reports. Let's see, let's go ahead and go on to the next page. So please feel free to raise your hand if you have questions. I'm trying to go slow so you guys can review with me. Let's see. The top of this section where the bullet points are is clarifications about who does project baseline agreements. For active transportation, it is clarification for the competitive. It's clarifying it's the programmed amount of competitive funds. And then for the SHOP projects, this is based on what was adopted into the last version of the SHOP guidelines. Let's see, the next change is the baseline agreement is required within 6 months. So we changed this from 60 days to 6 months to again be consistent with what the SHOP guidelines have. Let's see. The next section is the baseline agreement will identify which agency is responsible to pay cost increases on projects jointly nominated by the department and another local agency. The actual baseline agreement already has this in it, but we just, I added the language here to make sure that it was stood out. And then let's see, the last part of this is we're changing basic agreements, approved baseline agreements at a regular commission meeting within 6 months after program adoption. We changed that from 4 to 6, again, following what was adopted in the SHOP guidelines. So you guys are getting a little bit extra time. And then for this bottom section, this is kind of some cleanup. That first bullet was deleted as it's no longer applicable. For projects that have not received environmental clearance, baseline agreements are due 6 months after the lead agency completes a project level environmental document in accordance with CEQA. And what's new here is we added the NEPA if it's applicable. This used to only be pertaining to CEQA, so we added NEPA for the federal, if there's federal funds on the project. And then that last bullet is for the projects that are coming in for allocation in the 2 months following program adoption. This was trying to clarify when a baseline agreement would be due instead of putting actual dates. We were trying to make it more generic. So basically, these are due, the baseline agreements would be due 4 months after the program adoption for the projects that are coming in for allocation during the month the program is adopted or the following commission meeting. So in essence, you have 4 months if you're asking for an allocation at the same time versus if you're not asking for allocation, you have 6 months. And that change, if you remember right, that change to the 4 months, that was changed because of our executive management wanted it to be a shorter time period since you've already got your money. All right, so we can go on to page 4, or I'm sorry, the next page, which is page 5.
Hi, Dawn, real quick, we have 2 questions from that page.
Okay, yes.
So the first one is going to be from Denise. It says performance metrics were added to what is included in the completion report section on page 9. Will that come out if the project performance analysis will be required separately?
No, so you still have to report on whether or not you think you're meeting those performance metrics at the completion report. So that language is remaining there. So originally that language had just the outcomes, but since we now have this performance metrics identified for each program, we included it there too.
Perfect. And then the other one's going to be from Rachel. If NEPA clearance is finalized after CEQA, does the 6-month clock for baseline start after the last environmental doc is certified?
Yes, after the last one is certified, yes.
All right, Donna, I don't see any more questions or hands raised.
Okay, alrighty. So, okay, let's see. So we're on page 5 now. Let's see. At the very top, that was again date specific. So we're trying to get rid of the date specific information. The next is added. We added this for clarification for the ATP program. So for the allocation of a non-infrastructure portion of an ATP project that has infrastructure and non-infrastructure, a baseline is not required for that non-infrastructure portion. So we wanted to clarify that for that program. So in progress accountability, we added baseline agreements along with programming and allocations. And then the new language expects all the SB funded projects to be monitored for consistency with the adopted program and executed agreements, regardless of whether the project has the baseline agreement in place or not. So this is kind of clarifying that, for example, the LPP formula and some of the LPP competitive projects do not have baselines, but you're still on the hook for being responsible and accountable and transparent if there's any changes and reporting those changes. Let's see, for the ongoing program monitoring and in review, we just added the achievement of the estimated benefits. So are we still on track of achieving those estimated benefits as the project is progressing along? And we can go to the next page. Let's see, retention of documentation. In our audit section, I believe, or in the baseline agreement section, we had indicated that you had to retain the documentation for the methodologies and assumptions. And so that's just being repeated here in this section. And also we added progress reports and completion reports and final delivery reports for timely submittal, along with the reimbursement requests. Some more clarifications. And then for the program and project amendments, just kind of clarifying that a baseline amendment or addendum would also require a program or a project amendment approval. Let's see, and then section number 3 here, the baseline agreement and amendments and addendums. So this is, most of this is all new language based on our discussions about trying to implement this addendum process. which we talked about at our first workshop in August. So this would be something that I would encourage you guys to really look at and see if it makes sense. We were trying to give you a less time consuming and less process to do changes. And so we come up with this addendum. So I'm not going to read all of this all the way through, but please take the time to look through this new section and let me know if you have questions on this. And let's see, can go on to the next page.
Dawn, we do have another question.
Okay.
The question is going to be from Denise. What's the time frame for retention?
So our audits can happen, after completion of the project. So you have to keep it through for audit purposes. We didn't put a very specific year, but since we're proposing like a 5-year performance analysis report, then you would definitely need to keep those documentation for at least 5 years so that it can be referenced or reused if need be. But good question. If I need to put something more specific in here, then I can. I'm also thinking that if we have to do some type of reporting after a 5-year mark, then of course the retention of that documentation needs to be kept that long. So I'm making myself a note to look into that. Hang on one sec. Okay. Any other questions, comments coming in?
No other questions at this time.
Okay. Then let's go ahead and go to the next page. Let's see, program reporting. So we talked about deadlines, about when the progress reporting is due. And so we shared these deadlines with you at our, I believe, the August workshop. And so they are here. It does say, I want to point out that in that second paragraph for program reporting, the department will send at a minimum. So this is at a minimum that the department will do. My understanding is the department puts a lot of work into notifying and contacting the agencies each and every time the reporting process opens. So just want to make sure everyone understands that Caltrans does more than just these two reminders to local agencies. And they try their best to get you guys on board and get you your information reported. So just want to give Caltrans a nod that they do more than just this. So in the progress report section, the first changes, those are again clarification, and also there is a baseline agreement requirement and a reporting matrix that was in the original guidelines, and so I'm updating that. This particular sentence says to reference that, so I don't have it updated yet with this discussion draft, but I am updating it, and it's kind of just more of a where you can look at it at a glance and see if which sections of the guidelines your project is required to adhere to, kind of a shortened version of all the narrative language. Let's see, I did add the language regarding the local transportation climate adaptation program, which will adhere to the progress report section in its entirety. And we're also directing the department shall prepare a program progress report in the same manner as the SB1 program progress report and timeline. And then we deleted again specific date information from when we originally approved these guidelines. And we went to semi-annual reporting in July of 2019, and we're still proposing to keep it as semi-annual reports to the commission twice a year. And let's see, that's the changes for that section. So we can go on. The second section of the report, just again clarifying which projects are in here and referencing the reporting matrix. And again, the bullet points, the first couple is clarifications. The last two bullet points are kind of new to be included in the actual report. So the status of the department's review and approval of submitted completion and final delivery reports. And that last bullet is the list of agencies or projects that have not submitted a progress report, a completion report, or a final delivery report. So the last bullet, that language is included earlier in the guidelines. We're just now, and it says it's posted to Caltrans the department's website. So we're just now making it a part of the actual report. And again, I want to indicate that Caltrans does a whole lot of extra work and effort in getting progress reports submitted. So if they're reaching out to you, please respond to them in a timely manner. Let's see, there's no changes to the annual reports. Follow-up accountability, again, deleting date-specific information, and then clarification as to which projects. And again, you can refer to the reporting matrix. Okay, let's go ahead and go on to the next page. And I'll just pause here for a sec and see if there's any questions or comments. Nope. Okay, let's see. So for completion reports, we did add in project benefits, and then we added in performance metrics. So since we do have a very specific list of performance metrics, that will be included here also. Benefits are also kind of referred to as the performance metrics. Performance metrics, yeah, we're just adding in the new language that has been created with the Cycle 3 programs. Towards the bottom of the page, we've added a requirement for the department to notify implementing agencies about 30 days on submitting your completion reports. So you'll be getting reminders about that. And let's see, if you want to go on to the next page. And then the top of this page 10 is, again, reminders from the department on final delivery reports. It's kind of the same language as completion reports. And then section 3, the project performance analysis. Again, as I indicated, this is still under development, so the actual language here is still being developed based on information and comment and feedback that I get from you guys today, or in the next couple of days. If you want to submit via email to me, that would be great. So for the audit section, we actually reached out to the Inspector General and worked with them to create these updates. And so I think these are good updates, kind of clarifications. When we get down here to the bullet points, we just broke out the outcomes, which is basically the benefits and performance metrics, into its own bullet so that it wasn't, so it was more clear. And then we added that last bullet about preserving the information, the documentation. I believe audits has indicated that has been a concern of theirs, as that local agencies have not been retaining the information. So we're putting it here more boldly in writing so that you guys are more aware of it. Let's go on to the next section, or the next page, I'm sorry. And then we also added, at the very top of page 11, we also added the statement about variances over time, so that the auditors also know that there could very well be a change on the outcomes and performance metrics and benefits. And then in consequences for noncompliance, we just added clarification. We didn't make any changes whatsoever to this other than adding some clarification that it's applicable to all the projects and all the programs cited in these guidelines. And let's go ahead and go on to the next page. Let's see. Okay, so the baseline agreement template. I provided the web address where we have it up there. So we are gonna, I'm working with Caltrans to make some edits to that, but no major changes to that. So I didn't actually include a copy of the form, but there is the web link for you to go view the form if you have comments or edits to that one. And let's go on to the next page. This is the baseline agreement addendum template. This is a new form to go along with the new process of doing an addendum versus a amendment to the baseline. And so you guys can review this and let us know if you have any comments or questions regarding this. And then the next page, page 14, is the, let's see, if you want to go to the next page, oh, there we go. This is just kind of continuation of the new form for the addendum process. And then the baseline agreement and reporting matrix. This, I'm updating that now to be consistent with the actual narrative language. So that will be included, an updated version of this will be included in the draft guidelines going to the commission meeting in January. And so that is the end of the changes for the discussion draft. So any questions, comments? Anyone have anything?
Hi, Dawn. I'm not seeing any hands raised at the moment, and no, we do have one written comment. So Denise Arriaga said it would be nice to explicitly state that the variance in benefits is not considered non-compliance.
So yes, in the PowerPoint presentation, I have a slide that says that, and so that will be included in the narrative section for the performance analysis, the project performance analysis. So I will include that in that section too.
Thanks, Dawn. I'm not seeing any more hands raised and no written questions or comments at the moment.
Okay, all right. Let's go back to the PowerPoint presentation.
Okay, bear with me for just 1 minute.
Yep.
Okay, Dawn, I hope everyone can see this on their screen.
Yep, okay. Let's see. Alrighty. So closing next steps. So questions, comments, please feel free to write them now or raise your hand. It's always good to have the discussion or comments here during the workshop instead of afterwards, so everyone can participate in here. So a couple of things that I, for recap, that I noted is Angel had some good idea about using the validation of the data. So I will reach out to Angel and get a little bit more understanding of what that concept may look like. Let's see. I also have noted here that the performance analysis report will begin with the adoption of the Cycle 3 projects. And if there's differences between the PPR, the performance handbook, and the program guidelines, then of course the performance guidebook is what's going to take precedence. Let's see. And I'm going to also look into documentation retention and see about that. So that's what I have on my kind of action items for myself, and documenting some of the things that we talked about today. So let's see, just a reminder, comments due to me by December 27th. That gives you a couple days after Christmas. Let's see. If we do have a 4th workshop, I would anticipate having that in early February. And that'll be determined based on comments that we get after we present the draft guidelines in January. Or yeah, and so the actual draft guidelines going to the January Commission meeting will be posted on January 13th. So at that point, please make sure you review the Commission's meeting materials once it's posted to the website. And if you have formal comment letters that you want included, you can send them at that time. No, I'm sorry. If you have formal comment letters that you would like to be included in the book item for the draft guidelines, please get that to me no later than, hang on here. Let's see. I'm gonna say no later than, I'm just gonna say the 27th, December 27th. And if you need a couple extra days, then email me and I'll see what I can do to accommodate you. Let's see. What else do I have in my notes here? Hang on. I think that's it. Okay. All right, you guys. I would like you to, go back and review the 3 slides about the performance analysis and let me know your thoughts or your comments. Trying to make this as simple as possible, but also useful information. So let me know what you're thinking. But I think that's, if there's no other questions, comments that anyone wants to talk about or discuss, then I think we're just about done. I think I'll just pause here for a couple of seconds and see if any questions or comments come through, because I definitely want to get, we still have time here. So it's only been 1 hour and 15 minutes. So we still have time if you guys want to submit anything in the next couple of minutes. Okay, nothing is coming through.
Hi, Dawn. I'm not seeing any hands raised and no written questions or comments at the moment.
Okay, so here on the webinar, on the screen is our contact information. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I always appreciate your guys' input and comments and follow-up. That would be great. If you feel we'd like to have an actual conversation, just let me know, and I could definitely be available to, take a phone call with any of you. That works. So with that, if nothing else is coming in, then you guys have a good rest of your week. And if I don't hear from you or talk to you beforehand, enjoy your holidays, and look forward to hearing feedback on the draft guidelines when they're posted on January 13th. So anyways, everyone have a good day, and we'll talk to you soon.